Someone. All right.
Spare.
Good job. We have just 2 minutes to spare before we start. And I appreciate everyone being on time. Even Director McFadden, who's in the airport. It's called dedication. All right, 1 more minute.
Thank you.
So long, it looks like it's time, and
All right.
we have everybody present. So whenever you're ready.
Okay, good. My computer is slow. It's like 4:59. So I will be starting off our Fillmore Pyro GSA meeting. Thank you everyone for being here. I apologize I wasn't in attendance last week, but you were in good hands with Director McFadden. And first of all, let's do our Pledge of Allegiance. So Director McFadden, if you could start us off, that would be wonderful.
Okay, place your hand over your heart and join with me. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America
and to
the
the
republic
republic for which it stands,
one
one
nation,
nation,
under
under
God,
God,
indivisible,
indivisible,
liberty and
justice for all.
I wore a shirt with some
Thank you.
spikes on.
Okay, next is our director roll call.
Okay. Director Kimball.
Aye, here.
Okay, thank you. Chair Long,
Here.
Vice Chair McFadden,
Here,
Director Minigan,
Here,
Director Pace,
Here.
Director Villaseñor.
here.
Perfect.
All right, wonderful. Everyone is here in attendance. Next up is our public comments. Do we have any public comments?
I don't see any hands.
All right, none has been emailed or on the phone or in Zoom. Okay, so we will do the approval of the agenda. We would like to, right after this, move our agenda item, what is it,
4B.
4B to the very right after this item. So if we can get an approval of that minute, that motion of the amendment, I would love it.
move to approve as changed.
Okay, thank you. And a second, please.
Second,
Okay, it's been first and second and roll call.
Okay. Director Kimball,
Aye.
Chair Long,
Yes.
Vice Chair McFadden, Director Minigan,
aye.
Director Pace,
Aye.
Director Villaseñor.
Aye.
Perfect.
All right, that has been approved. Thank you. So the next item up will be our 4B.
So Chair Long, our legal counsel is going to start off and walk through this. I gave you a whole bunch of reading in the agenda package, including the executive order, as well as AB, let's see, which one is it? AB 2201 that has some similar provisions. And so, so we are going to walk through that.
Okay, thank you.
Steve, you're on mute. Steve, you're on mute.
Who's doing the presentation? Steve?
My
Yeah.
apologies. I didn't see that I was on mute. I just wanted to start the presentation by reminding you, at the last board meeting, we had a discussion about this executive order and what it looked like. And we wanted to go into it with a little bit more detail. And so what I plan to do is summarize the original authority that we have right now, pre-existing the executive order that the agency enjoys. And then the kind of expansion of powers that this executive order is considering, or it actually authorizes. And then some legislation that has arisen as a result of this. And then with Tony Morgan's assistance and Tony Emmert's assistance, we wanted to discuss about how the agency could address this moving forward. So starting with that premise, currently, we're a product of the Sigma law. And as you know, the Sigma law empowers us and warrants us to create these groundwater sustainability plans, which of course we've done. And the goal of those plans is long-term sustainability of the basins. And you may recall from some of our previous discussions that the water code sections that authorize our actions allow us to establish such things as well registration requirements. We can impose replenishment fees. We can impose extraction fees, and we also have the power to fine for non-compliance and the general power to assess fines and limit water production, all in furtherance of the goal of sustainability, all of course to further the GSP. Well, what the executive order does, and again, we touched on this a little bit, and it expands the role of the GSAs, because under this executive order, now a county or a city or any other public agency that is either going to approve a well permit or for a new well or for an alteration of an existing well has to turn to the local GSA and get assurance that in written approval from the GSA that planned activity, be it a new well or an alteration, has to be consistent with these groundwater sustainability goals and our GSP. And it's not very specific language. I think like a lot of these executive orders, in my view, they're done somewhat hastily. And the language is a little squishy. The actual language that's used is that before they approve a permit for a new groundwater well and alteration, there has to be a finding, a written approval from us, and verification that where the well is to be proposed would not be inconsistent with our GSP, or in any way impair the ability of our GSP to obtain sustainability. So a fair amount of latitude there. And then the other half of that part of the executive order states that the agency issuing the permit, and in our case, I believe it's the county that's going to be issuing these permits, they have to make some findings that it's not likely to interfere with the production and functioning of existing adjacent wells, and it's not likely to cause subsidence. So there's this kind of two-step process that the executive order implements, but the first step is they need written approval from the GSA to do this. And so, again, turning back to the executive order, they're only in place so long as the emergency is in place. And there was an effort that we touched on at the last meeting as well, a legislative effort from Assemblymember Bennett to essentially codify this into legislation. And it goes a little further. It mirrors the executive order in many ways, but Assembly Bill 2201 goes a little further in that there has to be a posting of the well permit application on the GSA website. Of course, that's designed to encourage public comment on a permit application. And the GSA can impose a fee on the county for our admin costs in having to do this. So it's designed to be revenue neutral essentially for the GSA. That bill was in committee yesterday morning, but the latest word is that now it's been put in the suspense file. I'm not a legislative expert, but from my understanding, I'll use my Catholic background to describe it. I think that means the bill is in purgatory. It could be taken up and be revitalized, or it could languish. Right now, my understanding is it is in suspense, so that means it's not moving forward. But it's certainly something we need to keep an eye on, because certainly it's going to could have an impact for the agency. And some of the other issues that we've identified with regards to our agency's role in this, because there were some questions, I believe, at the last meeting, if this could increase exposure or liability for the agency. And in terms of the district, or excuse me, the agency exercising its discretion on this written approval, we're generally going to have governmental immunity for those decisions. In the government code, there is statutory immunities for these discretionary actions, in terms of immunity from liability for discretionary actions. There's also the concept that you may be familiar with of regulatory taking. Where the government goes, we can all know about eminent domain. When the government goes and takes your property, it's obligated under the Constitution to provide you fair market value, or the reasonable value of your property. When there's a regulation that has the effect of limiting the use of private property to such a degree that the landowner is effectively deprived of any economically reasonable use or value of the property, that could be considered a taking. As of this point, we haven't seen any of those issues raised in the GSA universe statewide, but we just looked at that as one place where we might see some legal activity in the future. It's something we need to keep an eye on. And lastly, something that Tony, the two Tonys and I have conferred on in the past couple of weeks. There's a recent California Supreme Court case that brings CEQA into the fold, in that it had to do with well permitting in Stanislaus County. And as a general rule, if an agency is acting in a ministerial manner, meaning it really does not have any leeway, it's just got acting pursuant to a rigid set of rules where it doesn't exercise any judgment or any discretion, that kind of ministerial acts are generally exempt from CEQA. And so in Stanislaus County, they had an ordinance that said all well permitting is a ministerial act. And when the Supreme Court looked at it, they learned that the county actually did have discretion. They had discretion about where to locate wells relative to other wells or relative to potential contamination sources. So the court concluded that that in fact, those are not ministerial decisions, those are discretionary decisions, because the agency is actually using some judgment in deciding whether or not to execute a permit. So in the field of well permit issuance, we're seeing this kind of CEQA discussion now, that we're not sure how it's going to implicate the executive order or this agency, but it's again something on the radar screen we need to keep an eye on. And it's there's another layer here that's a little tricky that we still are trying to sort through, in that in the Stanislaus County case, the Supreme Court case, it was the county who had that discretion and was the lead agency making the determination. The executive order and potentially Assembly Bill 2201 sets up a structure where the GSA is advising essentially the county with its written approval, and then the county's making that decision. Does that expose us to some kind of CEQA liability as an advisory body, or will that just land and stay with the county? Not sure at this point. But again, it's something to keep an eye on, that these legal issues, I think, will develop over time, and we're going to have to monitor them. And that was kind of the kind of legal overview of that. And I'll stop here for any questions, but also want to let you know, Tony Morgan has a presentation and an approach to this, because our thinking was how could we best, in anticipation of us getting asked whether or not a well can go here or this well can be altered, how do we best address that? And so the thinking was we get some standard criteria that would look at that. And so Tony Morgan has developed a kind of a flow chart to walk us through how that might look. So I'll stop here for any questions at this point.
Okay, any questions for Scott? Go right ahead, unmute and ask away if anyone has any questions. Hearing none, it sounds like you covered everything.
So, hi,
Oh, go ahead, Carol.
hi, it's Carol Fornoff. So the CEQA obligation to this lies with the county or Sigma, or, you know, the GSA, or is it the landowner? Is
Well,
there,
if a permit is under CEQA, the public agency will be the agency approving the project, and they would be the one subject to perhaps a CEQA challenge. Not the landowner would be applying presumably to the agency for a well permit, and that decision would be likely subject to CEQA review if there was a discretionary act involved in issuing or considering that permit. Does that answer your question, ma'am?
I think so. There's just, like you said, all these is really ambiguous on what was laid out, but I appreciate your help.
Steve, could
Thank you. Go ahead.
offer in a question? So if CEQA were determined to be needed, would the cost for that fall to the permittee, the person asking for the well permit?
Generally, you know, that's I don't know the county's procedures, but in my experience, for example, a developer or someone coming to seeking a land use authorization, they usually are required to pay for that action.
Okay, thank you.
So,
Thank
Chair
you.
Long.
Go ahead.
So what could happen here is that the County of Ventura's well permitting process is found subject to CEQA. So any new well request would result in a CEQA process paid for by the landowner or the well owner, then basically.
Potentially, Director Kimball, but I must admit, I'm not intimately familiar with the county's processes for this. But in my experience, what I've seen is the agencies put those costs on for example, the developer or the applicant.
Yeah, I think that goes without a doubt.
Okay.
The question is whether it would have to go through a CEQA process, which would mean months or years and tens of thousands of dollars, probably at a minimum.
Well, one alternative is there could be a programmatic sort of approach to the CEQA requirement for the program at the county. And that way, you know, we could limit the burden on applicants. But that would obviously take some coordination with the county and a willingness from them to do that within their program.
Well, and also when we do programs, our fees cover the service, so that those type of fees like you're talking about are not under general fund is what I'm understanding. So they're more enterprise.
Unless I just want to bring to the board's attention Tony Morgan's invaluable assistance on this. He was familiar with this case and brought it to the fore for consideration.
So don't shoot the messenger. I'm just bringing it forward.
Yeah, keep trying.
There's going to be a legislation and law forum in June in coordination with the Groundwater Resources Association's GSA Summit. And Assembly Member Bennett's also going to be talking about AB 2201. So I think at that point, we should also understand if it's truly suspended or if it's going anywhere. These can also like go over 2-year periods. So it might get picked up to move forward next year if it is in suspension right now. It doesn't mean it's totally dead and, you know, bring it back in 2023, if not later this year.
You know, Chair Long and Director Mendigan, it may be a really wise thing for Assemblymember Bennett to allow a little bit of time to go by and see how this executive order plays out, because it may be some useful edits to the legislation. So I'm just thinking, if I was sponsoring something like that, I'd kind of let the governor do the lead blocking and see how this all plays out and get some of these questions answered, and then you can tailor that bill to be, you know, more effective and work. So I think we should expect that kind of legislation is highly likely.
Well,
This one or as another one that's going to be like that.
and so Tony, is a suggestion also to write a letter to say Assemblyman Bennett to state what we would like them to look at. I think that would be advantageous.
Yes, Chair Long, I completely agree. As we're working through this issue on how we would implement that, I think that would be extremely useful to give feedback to Assemblymember Bennett. And you know, if we see some changes that would make it work better, I think that would be greatly appreciated.
I think that we should give direction to staff to write a letter for that in regards to our concerns, to make sure that we're looking at our GSA and our members within. I think that is an important, it doesn't mean that he'll listen or anyone will, but maybe they will. And I think it's worth it.
I would support that because I fundamentally object to that legislation in that it's dictatorial from the top, it's prohibitive and restrictive, when in fact SGMA is actually a very good piece of legislation in that it's goal oriented. The goal is set, it's clear, the goal of each GSA. And it's clear that each GSA has a responsibility for deciding the most effective, efficient way to achieve that. And this legislation restricts or basically applies a general thing. I mean, we've decided we don't have subsidence here. If the county has to do a subsidence study for every well, unless they're willing to just take our finding, I mean, it's a huge amount of work. And the fundamental thing is that this thing about wells and sustainability is irrational. A well does not have anything to do with sustainability or the size of the pump in the well or the depth of the well. And in fact, to save our well just recently, we had to backfill it by 40 feet to keep it from collapsing. That's a modification. If we had to go through this process, we probably would have lost the well. The well is not anything to do with sustainability. It's the extractions from the basin that control sustainability. And that's the GSA's responsibility. How it's done, where it's done is quite often irrelevant. And the county already goes through a review process about adjacent wells and effect. This does, for our basins in particular, it does nothing except delay the process, add add costs that do nothing towards achieving sustainability. So as you can see, I feel fairly strongly that we should write a letter and to Supervisor or to Assemblyman Bennett and to whoever else, because this does not do anything towards achieving sustainability. It's irrational.
Well, I think that your point of it should be at the control of the GSA for those decisions, and that it should be local control, not just a statewide mandate. That should be the decision of our GSAs. That's why they've created them.
Well, the way I understood the legislation is less that it's dictatorial. It's more that the legislation is trying to ensure that the count process doesn't undermine our goal setting, which is kind of Gordon, I think the point you're saying is we've set goals and minimum thresholds and things within our GSA. The whole point is that the county has to confer with the GSA to make sure that our goals aren't undermined by approved.
No, I don't think so, because the extractions, no matter where they come from, no matter how many wells are permitted by the county, it's the extractions from those wells that limit it. The fact that there are more wells doesn't mean there'll be more extractions. And any GSA that has a problem with unsustainability is going to limit extractions. And it's not going to limit the number of wells or limit the number of extractions per well. It's the total extractions from the basin. If I have 5 wells, if I have 1 well and I get an allocation, it's so much. If I have 5 wells, I just divide the allocation among the wells. It's the extraction allocation, not the well, that achieves sustainability. And it really doesn't matter how many are permitted. I further object to the fact that
extraction capability of
Hey, Candace, can you let him finish first? Go ahead.
And the cities are excluded from this. And that makes no sense, because if it really matters, the GSA needs to control all the extractions. If in theory, the number of wells actually did, it doesn't.
Are you done? Go ahead, Candace.
Gordon, I understand the point you're making that, there's a number of wells, but you have a certain allocation. And I think that is spelled out during the permitting process. The whole point is more that the number of wells doesn't throw the proportion of your allocation off, and that allocation doesn't impact the GSA's goals for sustainability. I'm not reading the legislation or interpreting it the way that you are. I see it more of a protection that the county is being asked to confer with us to make sure that our goals aren't undermined by their approval process. My concern is more that we don't want to necessarily put the onus on the GSA to do CEQA, like that CEQA requirement is, I would say we want to keep squarely at the county, because to Steve O'Neill's point earlier, we don't want to open ourselves up to CEQA by being, having discretion and providing comment. We can provide comment, but the decision around CEQA, those findings need to squarely stay within the county's purview so that it protects us from the CEQA issue that came up at Stanislaus. And I'd say the legislation would need to be more protective in separating the CEQA requirements between the GSA and the county or the city, whoever that permit issuing party is in your specific GSA. I'd recommend wording along those lines in a letter to Assemblyman Bennett.
If I remember hearing some of the comments about the reasoning for this legislation. I don't think we have either of the problems in our county. We have a pretty good coordination between the County of Ventura Water Resources folks and this GSA. Dan Dedmer and I met with county folks a couple of weeks ago, and we meet on a regular basis to coordinate this. But I think some counties, including Los Angeles County, have well permits routinely issued by health departments. So the Department of Public Health in the County of Los Angeles issues the wells. And so there may be a problem there in that county because there's a big disconnect between GSAs and the public health. And then the other example that I heard cited were some small rural communities, probably in an unincorporated county area in the San Joaquin Valley, where they have a shallow communal well that may serve 20 houses, and somebody puts a couple thousand GPM well across the street, and it all of a sudden the drawdown is so much that it causes serious problems for that small community well. I don't think our basins really are going to have those problems to speak, and it doesn't seem like our county has those. But we can comment in that kind of we can comment to Assemblymember Bennett on those issues, and it seems like I'm hearing pretty clearly from all of our board members that we're concerned that this will be overly burdensome and or increase the time to get a well permit for somebody who really needs something fast. Director Kimball just had a real life example that an older well was failing and had to do something fast. So I think that's another comment that we can provide Assemblymember Bennett on that. Is there a provision for something like that where there's a replacement well that's in kind and speed up the approval and make that ministerial rather than the other. But I think we have the basis of a comment letter, and I can work with legal counsel and Tony Morgan and see if we can craft something for this board's. It seems like we have some time, so this is not ready to be signed into law at this moment. And we know Assemblymember Bennett, and he'll soon be representing most of our county, or likely. And so I think we can put something together on that.
Can I ask one more question? Can I ask one more? I'm sorry, I'm interrupting it. Should I just put it in chat?
Hold on real quick. I just wanted to thank Scott and Tony for bringing this to our attention. Assemblymember Bennett did really implement the well moratorium on the county level when he was the Board of Supervisors. And my thought is that he is now transferring this similar process statewide. And so that's the bill. And I think that we should agree to how it would affect us as a GSA, because he is our representative, and that's important that he hears from our GSA. Now, are there any other director comments before I go to public comments?
I have a comment, but I think Ed was ahead of me.
I had my hand up here at the airport, so to speak. I'm strongly in support of a letter to Assemblyman Bennett along the lines that Gordon described. It seems like we're going to be asked to add in layers that are unnecessary. I kind of get the feeling that we're not trusted, which is too bad. And our task is to put together a groundwater sustainability plan, and in the eyes of DWR, bring the basins into a state of sustainability through our own local control. This seems to be a detour around that. So I'm strongly in favor of the letter as Gordon described.
And Director Minigan?
I was just gonna say that I hear Tony Emmert's comment about, our county is different from other counties, but I think we also need to be aware of what's happening in other counties. The New Hall Ranch development is going to be getting its water supply from groundwater, which is upstream of our basins. And so, their sustainability upstream has potential future impacts on our basins. So, I think this is, again, that opportunity for public comment on wells upstream, where the GSA findings might not be as protective as we'd like them to be. That's an opportunity for us to comment so that it doesn't negatively impact our basins downstream. Yes, we are going to have coordinatory agreements, but that doesn't mean that we necessarily are going to agree with all their sustainable metrics and their goal setting upstream, which could have negative impacts on us. I think, I'm hearing the need to write a letter to Assemblymember Bennett. I'm not quite interpreting the legislation the same way as Gordon and Director McFadden. I think this is more a way for us to coordinate with the permitting authority, which currently is Ventura County. I think there could be language about how that coordination happens, so that it isn't onerous and time consuming. And the comment should be more about solutions rather than this is just not a helpful piece of legislation. I do think it is helpful for us to be coordinating with the permit issuer, which is the county as a GSA, because their decisions about whether or not permits get issued does have an impact on our goals and objectives.
Okay, and Director Kimball.
Just quickly, I guess I wouldn't object if we need these powers and these powers are not in Sigma. I wouldn't object if the legislation gave the GSAs the powers and then it was up to the GSA to choose how to implement that. I think that's the problem, is that it's mandatory. We don't have the option to say, well, we don't have subsidence, so we don't need that criterion. And if we don't, and we have a close relationship with an effective body that issues the permits. So I guess listening to this, I think that'd be a recommendation, is that it not be mandatory, but if we need these authorities, that legislation gave us those and we had the discretion to use them, that would be appropriate. So the letter could say that. Thank you.
Thank you. And any other director? Okay, I believe there was a public comment or a question.
Yes, this is Carol again. I'm sorry for interrupting. The legislation, does it include repairs on existing wells? Because I ran into some problems where I had to go through the same hoops as drilling a well. And, if there's anything that you could put into that letter, stating that repairs and maintenance are standard operating procedures, so that we don't have to delay and force a crop to abort. I would be in agreement with that, and I agree with what Gordon has been conveying as well. Thanks for the time.
And Scott or Tony, do you have any questions? Do you have a response to that about modifications to a well?
I can offer that I think the way I interpret the language in the executive order, and since we're kind of setting aside Bill 2201 for the moment, since we think it's in suspense, is that there's no permit required if you're going to put a new pump in your well or a new motor. There's no permit for that. So unless you have to jump into the category of permitting, then it seems like this is not applicable to you. If you're going to drill a new well, obviously you do fall in that category. But if you're just doing maintenance kinds of things, I don't believe the county requires you to have a permit for a well rehabilitation effort, or pulling your pump and putting in a new motor, or putting 40 more feet of pipe on lowering your pump in your well. I don't think that's an issue, at least the way I interpret the language here in the executive order.
Yeah, I would agree with Tony's interpretation. It is triggered by a permit. That seems to be the kind of operative fact here. But again, looking at it, there's no definition of alteration. And,
Correct.
what Gordon described, is that an alteration or is that an improvement? I mean, that's maybe something we put in the letter as well, that, just what is the intent here? What do they mean by alteration?
Well, I think that would be a clarifying that we would want to clarify that it is for new wells only. Because they could state that you need a whole new permit or CEQA for digging it deeper or fixing something. The language that they use can be very broad in that to stretch it out. So we want to make sure it's very succinct into the smaller section. Okay. Any other public comments? This is a receive and file, so I don't believe we would need a vote to motion to receive and file and to send a letter.
Chair Lund, we had another thing that if we have time, we'd like to walk through. And
Yeah.
Tony, I think you have the flow chart that we'd like to walk through, correct?
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
Yeah, I do. So when legal counsel and the executive director and I got together, we began chatting about, well, if we really had to do all this, is there a way we could structure the process so that there are as few decision points as possible that might kick the process into the discretionary category and may cause us to have CEQA invoked? And so the flow chart you see on the screen and was included in the agenda packet, and I apologize for it being kind of small print at times and tedious, but we tried to capture all the decision points along there. So if you start over on the left-hand side there where the yellow boxes are, it basically takes you through a permit, comes from the county to the agency, and then we start some decision points there. So is it an extraction well, yes or no? If it's no, and it turns out it's a monitoring well, okay, we're good. Nobody's pumping any water. We don't need to worry about it, but a monitoring well still has to have a permit. So it kind of kicks you into that. So that's a very ministerial kind of evaluation. If it's not an extraction well and a monitoring well, then what is it? So we got to go back to the applicant and ask for clarification on what they're doing. Okay, so then we come up to this point and we talk about, is it a replacement well? If yes, then we're coming up to here and we're saying, is it going to go in the same location and the same amount of pumping? And so we come across our decision tree here. And if it's the same amount of pumping in approximately the same place on the ground, then yeah, that kind of extraction was already accounted for in the GSP. We don't need to do any additional analysis of that. It's already grandfathered in the way I think of it as. If it's no, then we come down, we have a couple other steps to go through. And so this is where we get into this portion of a replacement well that is a little bit discretionary. If we say we're going to do a quick analysis and I've got a simple spreadsheet that we can plug values into and try to determine whether a well is likely, I'm not saying it will, whether it's likely to cause excessive interference with a neighboring well, and we the board here has to decide how much interference is too much. But if it's yes, then you go to the applicant and say, are you, instead of pumping 1,000, could you cut it to 750? Would that work for you? And if the answer is yes, then they go up and they get their permit approved. It's conditioned upon having that amount of pumping. And so that's the general process if it's a replacement well. If it's a new well, we have the first decision point here is this going to be an export from the basin? And I made the assumption, and it's only my assumption, it's nothing the board has said, is that if you're going to export the water out of the basin, we're going to say, nah, we're not too keen about that. We're going to say no. Okay, and it's going to be disapproved. If I take that back, it's not disapproved by the agency. You're giving the county a thumbs down for that application. So if it's not going through, it goes through a similar style of evaluation, and we make decisions on whether or not the permit is approved. So the idea was to make as many of these steps as cut and dried as possible, so that they have as few discretionary points as possible, so that it becomes very ministerial-like. And if I've walked too far out on that word, on that limb, the attorneys can saw it off behind me if they need to. But that's the idea behind this flow chart, is if we got backed into a corner and we had to do this, and 2201 does in fact become law, there is a process we could go through here that eliminates a lot of the discretionary stuff just by making some assumptions on how we would evaluate these. So very quick overview of it. If you have specific questions about any one of the boxes or whatever there, we can go over those in detail if you like.
Director, do you have any questions on this flow chart or the thought process behind it?
Director Long or Chair
Yes,
Long?
go ahead.
Yeah, I think this is great and very helpful. The one thing, because we're in it at the moment, we have half a well. We're drilling a replacement well for that half well, and we hope eventually to drill a backup well so that our 21,000 trees are not dependent on one well, and when it goes down, they go without water for weeks. So we probably need to add, because I think there will be cases where people want the same level of extraction. We can't use more water, but we need the ability to pump from either both wells at the same time at a lower level, or have one as a backup when the other one goes down. So
okay. Yeah.
At some point, if we need to fill this out, I'm pretty sure that's another path that we need to make non-discretionary.
Good point. Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you. Thank you for the work on this, because this is not simple.
Well, and I actually really appreciate the thought process, and really, take an example and go through this flow chart and see where it goes. I really appreciate it. Thank goodness we have the brain knowledge to be able to do this. So thank you. Director Villaseñor.
Yeah, I just wanted to reiterate that. Thank you for this sample of something, again, that could potentially be something that our GSA needs to use. Just a question. I know, Tony, you went over determining closeness to other wells, and one of you pointed that out. But I think you had mentioned earlier in your presentation that that's something already that the county does. And I understand that our GSA would be, this isn't a yay or nay, this is our recommendation to the permitting agency. But it would be just important to know, what are the criteria that they're using? What is it that we would be using? Wouldn't it be on par? Just to, and if it's not, why would it not be? So that's just something that came to my mind.
Thank you. Okay, any other directors?
Yeah, I would just say, I think one of like talking to this criteria that Christina has just mentioned, the closeness to other wells. I think, we'd want to look at the closeness to groundwater dependent ecosystems as a criteria, and whether or not those are impacted as another decision-making item in this decision tree. But on the overall, I do like the streamlined approach to how to address, how to move, from administrational and discretionary permits for different wells. I think this will be helpful.
And Director Minigan, the GDEs are included in there. So there's a criteria for wells and for GDEs for an impact to them. So
Great. Thank
I knew that would be an issue. So it needed to be covered in the flow chart somewhere.
Okay.
Good. Thank you. Okay, Tony, is there any other item that you want to cover before I ask for a motion?
That's it.
Caroline, I don't think anything else. So if I can recap the actions from this,
Thank you.
we do have executive order N722 that is applicable to us today.
Mhm.
So with the comments that you have given us, we will continue to, we really received the comments from the board on this flow chart because we didn't know how to talk about this without working through examples. We said, well, let's think about all these different examples and how would we handle those? And I'm glad it worked out. So we will flesh this out a little bit more, and then we will coordinate with the county water resources folks who actually have this responsibility from this executive order, and then we can report back. Just today, a well permit application came into the county of Ventura's office for drilling a well in one of our basins. And so they got the news from county staff that, oh, there's this extra step, but we don't quite know how we're doing it. And so that information got forwarded to one of Dan Detmer's team members just this afternoon. So we did inform that person that there is this executive order and there probably are going to be some other steps, and we're working on this tonight. And so we'll get back to that person, but as we're developing this, we may have a test case to work through that may have to come before the board, because I don't believe that staff and consultants can make these decisions without the board's direction. So that's something that you'll likely see in the near future. I don't really know anything about. I just asked Kathleen Cooper, send this executive orders to the person and get a bunch of information from what they're planning to do, because that'll help us advise them. So we do have some real wells that are going to be before us soon. We will coordinate with the county and bring something back for your approval, at least for the executive order. And then number 2 action is we will Tony Morgan and Stephen O'Neill and I will work on putting a letter together to Assemblymember Bennett commenting on the draft legislation, and so we'll bring that back. I don't think we're in such a hurry that it has to be shut off before the next meeting. I think that there'll be some time, so we'll put that together and bring it back for your board's consideration.
Thank you. And Director Kimball, did you have a comment?
Just a quick question. What's the term of the executive order? When does it expire?
When the drought is over.
It's coincident with the state of emergency.
Yeah.
Right.
And who knows?
There is no end date until levels get up to a certain point. Is that correct? The determine isn't just willy-nilly, let's just let it roll. There's actually checkpoints in which it was put in place, right? So we have to get back to the levels we were for it to be lifted. Is that correct?
Yeah, I need to get back to the board on that. I know they're.
That would be helpful for us.
I'll get back to you on that. I don't have it at my fingertips.
No worries. That'll be helpful.
Caroline, that tied to the April 12th, 2021, May 10th, 2021, July 8th, and October 2021 proclamations of emergency. And I think that was the emergency that started in a more concentrated area and then rolled out eventually to all counties in the state. So it really ties to that. So we'll go back and look at those emergency declarations, and they'll have the trigger on which, it will end.
Thank you. And I think that's helpful for our constituents, our well owners to know that. So thank you. Okay. So any other further questions? Any comments from our constituents or public comments? All right, so at this point, I would then take a motion as staff has reiterated. Directors,
So moved.
thank you. First by Director Kimball and a second, please.
Second.
Second by Director McFadden, and roll call.
Director Kimball,
Aye.
Chair Long,
Aye.
Vice Chair McFadden,
Aye.
Director Minigan,
Aye.
Director Pace,
Aye.
Director Villaseñor. Did I hear an aye? Okay, perfect.
Okay, motion is approved unanimous. Thank you. So really hard work getting all that done. And so appreciate the preparing of the information beforehand. It made today's discussion go much better. So thank you. Okay, moving back to item 2, we have updates. So we'll start with our directors, and we have our Fillmore Pumpers Association stakeholder.
Okay, thank you, Chair Long. The Fillmore Pumpers and the Piru Pumpers had their board meeting on May 10th. We'll have our annual meeting on June 14th at 9 a.m. by Zoom. And at that meeting, we'll do our legally required business part of the meeting. And then we're hoping to have updates from Tony Emmert, just a little update on where the GSA is. We've asked Brian Bondi, our consultant, to give us an update on sort of the GSAs that he's been involved in, sort of what's happening in that, in general, in that area. And I think we'd like to get an update from United. At the very minimum, we'd like to get their presentation on the 20-25 year rain dry cycles. I can never remember the proper name of that, but it's the big fear of when is it going to rain again? And actually there is some history that unless after 700 years it suddenly changes, gives us hope that we're coming out of a dry cycle into a wet cycle. And there is some predictability to our unpredictable rain. So we're hoping to get that very interesting presentation, which a number of, in fact, probably almost all of the directors have seen, but it's actually very interesting. So I think that's all I had on our update. Thank you.
Thank you. And Piru Pumpers.
For Piru, it's basically the same that Gordon has mentioned. So we're still moving forward with things. I guess the only difference for me is that we are working through, as the Pumpers Association, working on a replacement for me as that time gets closer. So we've had those discussions, things are moving along there. So I think we're not going to have a problem there. We'll just be able to keep moving forward with who we're discussing now. So I think that's all going to be positive from the Piru. And I think that, if I'm not mistaken, that happens in July meeting. Is that correct?
That's correct.
So a couple more meetings at least for me. So.
Well, yeah, I'll hold my comments to my side. Environmental stakeholders.
Hi, everybody. So on May 12th, Friends of the Santa Clara River commented at the Los Angeles Regional Water Quality Control Board on the Valencia and Saugus water reclamation plants. So they had a hearing for their MPDS permit. Of concern was that they were saying temperature wasn't an issue, and they didn't define what the natural conditions were. So there was no way to say whether the temperature increase from the releases from the reclamation plant would be more than 5% above natural, which is required under the Clean Water Act. They claimed that the stream water was unusually low in this portion of the river due to groundwater upwelling. And well, that's precisely where we have groundwater dependent ecosystems, because there is natural groundwater upwelling. And the data had shown that there was a difference in the temperature directly upstream of the plant and directly downstream of the plant, and that sometimes those changes were more than 5 degrees, 80% of the time, and sometimes as much as even a 20-degree difference downstream of the facility. So ultimately, the site has been in violation of the Clean Water Act. You know that I've been asking for them to come talk about the permit conditions and what the future plans are for the facility, because that has the potential to impact our water quality as their outfall comes into our basins, and if they are pumping water into our basin at 20% higher than the natural condition, that potentially poses a water quality issue for us in our basin. And that's obviously also of concern because the petition to list steelhead within the state has been approved. So currently steelhead has state and federal endangered species protections, and water quality is a big habitat suitability issue. So we commented on that and said that we wanted ongoing monitoring for water temperature. We also asked for ongoing monitoring with regards to copper compounds coming out of the facility, because that also has potential to impact steelhead. And then lastly, I have registered to attend the GSA Summit in Sacramento in June, and as well as the legislation and law conference the day before. So I'll be attending those. The law and legislation conference actually looks really great. They're going to be discussing some of the challenges around SGMA and policy and legislation. And as I mentioned, Assemblymember Bennett's also going to be talking about his bill amongst a whole bunch of other knowledgeable folks. So looking forward to that.
Thank you very much. In the city of Fillmore?
Good evening. Just a couple of updates from City of Fillmore. As you know, we're quite the growing city with still 138 more homes to be built down in our bridges section. The Planning Commission and soon City Council will review and eventually get to the approval of the North Fillmore specific plan, which would be another housing development, of course, in the north side of Fillmore going up towards Good Enough Road. There's some land there that I think Williams Homes has been trying to build on for quite a bit. Other areas in the city are industrial area there on the southeast part of town, just south of 126. I'm sorry, southwest, I should say, going towards Santa Paula. We're looking at potential development there, and so that's some updates that are coming. We again, we're continuing to expand and kind of fill in our space. We have, and with that, staff is also growing. And so we're moving up our senior planner to be an assistant development director. And soon we'll have a senior planner position available. So I get that and get the word out. If you have anyways, we're trying to attract folks with competitive salary and benefits and good perks. So we know it's hard to hold on to people these days and to have them come to Fillmore. So I'll keep you all updated with that. But that's about it. Thank you.
Thank you. And United Water?
Nothing new to report from United tonight.
Okay, first of all, I would like to just say thank you very much to Director Pace and Director McFadden for your long-term service on this board and all the others, but you are leaving us. I say that in a very kind meaning. I really just appreciate all your forethought and ideas coming to this board, and I know we'll in July say a little bit more, but I wasn't here at the last meeting, and so I just wanted to put that in there. Secondly, we had a wonderful Santa Clara River watershed meeting this morning. Thank you, Tony Emmerich and United, for hosting that. Governor Newsom has delivered $47.1 billion in climate commitment for the May revise he just announced, and there's a lot that goes on with that. And also with state and federal grants associated with water. Lynn Rodriguez sent out an email in regards to Proposition 1, Round 2 integrated water management grants. There's also disadvantaged community grants, which we should be looking at because of our municipalities in the Groundwater Sustainable Agency. If they have project ready plans, we are able to submit for a grant. So they're looking for one-time deals, right? Not ongoing operation costs, but one time that could stimulate water usage, either by using it multiple times, 6 times, storage, desalters, all those type of things. And so I just want to make sure that everyone is aware of that. So along with the ordinances and laws that are coming out of the state in regards to water conservation and how to use it, there's also grants associated with infrastructure and so forth. So I want to make sure that's on everyone's radar. Also on May 10th, the Board of Supervisors had a meeting and we had a very good presentation in regards to water supply for Ventura County as we go into this drought. We had United Water, Callegas was there, and also Casitas in regards to plans associated with infrastructure, along with the Fox Canyon and pipelines for Ventura, all sorts of others, which I think is really important for our GSA. We need to know if we're the pinnacle groundwater storage coming in, and then it goes all the way down to Fox Canyon. I think we need to understand what our neighbors are doing and what are their plans. And so I invite anyone to go to the Santa Clara River watershed meeting to get more information, or perhaps Tony, we can get any presentation here in regards to what are the projects coming up. I think that's important. So for us, our GSA is our 2 wells, or at least 1 well to do it. But there's other things going on with United, with diversion, with pipelines, with brine lines. We just put a desalter in, the city of Camarillo did, which is really great. And it'll be operable in July. But I think that's important for us to understand. One, might stir some creativity for us as to what projects we could work with other people with, or, just good to know information. Also in the Santa Clara River watershed, the Santa Clara is there as well, Heather, and to give us some insight on that is really good because, water flows from them. So just wanted to give that as an update as well. And so I appreciated Jeff Pratt from the county providing that information and getting that update. And if anyone wants more information on that, it's on our ventura.org BOS website, and it's under our May 10th agenda. Item number 30, it was a 9 o'clock time certain, and the presentations and the dialogue and discussions are on there as well. And so with that, I think that's enough updates from the county for now. So we will move on to our executive director report.
I'll try to keep this brief. since we've had good discussions already and some very good information, but we were able to submit progress report 12 and invoice number 12 on our grant, and got that in. I did want to mention, we'll schedule this at some future time, but the comment period on the 2 DWR on our GSPs closed on the 23rd, although I'm not sure if they're still accepting comments. They may, but the official comments were submitted. We had 3 comments on each of the agencies from, well, I guess I should say both GSPs had comments from California Department of Fish and Wildlife and National Marine Fisheries Service, and a coalition of groups that has been working together to, on most of the GSPs I've seen, there have been comments from that coalition. And the Fillmore Basin had a comment from a resident. Essentially, that was a very straightforward comment saying that, you know, we ought to be implementing conservation and water efficiency measures. And so those were the 7 comments on the GSPs, and I will get together with our with Tony Morgan's team, and we'll look through those, and we can let you know if there's anything else. Both CDFW and National Marine Fisheries Service submitted comments on the draft versions, and at first blush, most of the comments were very much the same, but we'll take a closer look and see if there are any actions that we would like to bring forward and next steps. The last thing that I want to bring up is we had said a couple of months ago that when COVID lightens up a little bit, we'd like to actually physically get together and celebrate some of the successes. So we're hoping to do that. The biggest challenge is going to be trying to work on this group schedule and find a time that everybody's available. Caroline, we checked with her, probably the busiest and tightest scheduled person. And she was suggesting between now and June 11th at the least. I don't know if there are any days that are terrible on that. We're suggesting maybe to gather at El Pescador and Fillmore. I've checked with them, and they have a lot of space. And we don't have to hang out for a whole evening, but it sure would be nice to get together in person for a while and not be quite as concerned of COVID as we were for the past couple of years. So, I think at the time we were starting to work on this, we didn't really realize that, well, we had actually advance warning of more than a year from Director Pace. We didn't know Director McFadden was going to be moving further north and out of the basins, but we'd really like to do that before either of them are hitting the road someplace else. So I don't know if there are any dates. So we've got basically about three weeks or so, or yeah, 3 weeks during that time. And are there any dates that like days of the week that would be good that we should look for?
How about Friday the 3rd?
Would Friday the 3rd work for this group? All right, well, let's shoot for that. We're going to have to seek legal counsel's advice on whether we have to post we have to post to cover our leaders on Brown Act. We'll have a majority of our board there, but I think there are provisions for us to do that kind of thing.
We just can't talk district business.
Yeah, so we can just celebrate and smile that day. So, all right, well, I thought that might be more difficult than it was, but we'll shoot for getting something together for June 3rd.
Is that 5 o'clock? Will that be 5 o'clock? Or what's the time frame?
That sound good?
Or later?
Let's say 5. That's happy hour.
Okay.
Perfect.
I haven't been to a happy hour for a long time. Okay, Chairman, that's all I have then.
All right, thank you very much. And I appreciate your follow-up on that, you and Eva. Thank you. Next is our legal counsel update.
Thank you, Chair Long. For the last couple of weeks, I've been working with the two Tonys on the presentation today. Also executed some resolutions and reviewed and executed an amendment to the DB Stevens agreement concerning GSP implementation. And that pretty much concludes our activities. Just one other item of note, and Tony Emmett, you can help me with this. There was another kind of state edict about state money in excess of $5 million. There's as a result of the events in Ukraine, we have to comply with reporting if there's any Russian entities involved in any of our contracting. But I don't think we get more than 5 million, do we?
No.
Okay.
No, we don't.
Okay.
Unless DB Stevens and Associates has a Ukrainian or Russian brand. I think we're probably okay.
Okay, thanks. Well, that concludes my report, Chair Long.
Thank you very much. And moving on to our GSP consultant update.
Evening, folks. We'll keep this pretty quick. Well, the activities that for your GSP team have been working on redacting the owner information on the well completion reports that are in the online database. If you'll recall, those completion reports are in the database, but they're currently turned off so they're not visible to the public. And so we're working our way through redacting the information. It sounds simple, but the state has changed the form multiple times over the decades. And so we have all kinds, we probably have 7 or 8 different versions of what a well completion report looks like. And every place they have the owner's information put in a different location. So it's not like you can automate the redaction process. So there's a little bit of a manual effort to get that done. There's no timeline on that, but it'll get done soon. We established the as needed on-call professional services agreement, and the first task associated with that was the initiation of online database hosting services. So that's underway. Working with the executive director to get him a scope and a budget for an updated subsidence technical memorandum. The DWR has provided additional INSAR data, and so we need to take a look at that and see what that means for our current, for our 2 basins. The implementation planning services agreement was there. We've been using that as the vehicle for doing the well permitting process flowchart that you saw today, and then any meetings that come up regarding the Sienna Springs restoration project, that falls under that that services agreement. And then, excuse me, lastly, the GSP development agreement is still there and has some funds left in it, and so we're using that when we're doing consultation with United Water regarding the monitoring well project and drilling procedures and those kinds of things. And so I wanted to shift gears slightly and talk about a funding opportunity that's coming up rapidly on us. Round 2 of the Sigma implementation proposals are coming out soon. That's in the, excuse me, applications starting in September. And round 1, if you recall, was for only critically overdrafted basins, but round 2 is for medium and high basins can submit. There's, I think it's $202 million worth of funds available there. They want to give out awards in the $1 million to $20 million at a time category. We can apply for each basin separately. So I think it, there's a potential there if they stick to their minimum awards. I think we could do a lot with a couple $1 million between the 2 basins. Currently, there are no matching funds required for that. And the decision is anticipated. The actual finalization of the paperwork is like in July of 2023, but they'd let you know like in April, I believe it is, of 2023, what the award looks like for all of the applicants. So that's coming up not too distant. I mean, it's September, but it does take time to begin to put things together. And so this becomes a decent vehicle for us to try to get grant monies to support any of the projects and management actions that were contained in the GSP. And I like this pot of money because, number one, you're only competing against other GSAs. Nobody else can compete for this pot of money, and there are no matching funds. So that's an awesome combination to go forward with. So there are other funding opportunities coming up, and Director Long mentioned that, and others have spoken to that. This is just a smattering of those that are out there. There's many other things coming on, but those generally have a larger suite of firms or entities that we would be competing against. And so we, I think we should focus at least initially on the round 2 monies for the implementation grants, but we certainly should not ignore these other ones. We should keep our eyes open for opportunities that are there. So to refresh your memory, what were those projects and management actions that were included in the GSP? And so they're listed up here on the screen. You know, the Cienega Springs Restoration Project, constructing the shallow monitoring wells there. We've got money via the current grant for the GSP development. There was potential for constructing some shallow monitoring wells at other locations. We had purchase of supplemental waters as an option there, additional water quality sampling, non-native vegetation removal, and then a subsidence infrastructure vulnerability evaluation effort. And so I put project number 4, purchase of supplemental waters. That's something that most of the grants, I don't think I've ever seen a grant that authorized you to use that to buy water, to use their funds to buy water. So that one would be hard to fill with grant funds, but some of these others would. And so, for example, what would we use grant monies for the Cienega Springs project? For example, maybe we want to go look at one of those existing wells that's nearby. Remember, that project is conceived to take water from a deeper well near the project site, near the restoration project site, and use that deep aquifer water as a supplemental supply during drought periods to help maintain the habitat there. And so maybe some grant monies could be used to evaluate that well, if it needs a new pump or motor or whatever. We could use grant funds for those kinds of things. So there are lots of options out there that we could think about. And what I would suggest to the board, to the agency in general, is that we begin to include discussions of these projects in the next few board meetings. And so we're beginning to develop a list, a priority, if you will, of which one of these we would like to put in the hopper to try to get some grant funding for, and assemble those up for a round 2 grant application. Again, if there's other grants out there, that's fine too, but we need to have some internal discussions, I think, so we know where to aim at on the grant application. So that would be my suggestion to the directors. And so that's all I have for this evening. Questions or comments?
All right, questions or comments? Candace, Director Minigan?
Yeah, thank you, Tony. I would support that we add the discussion for projects on our upcoming agendas. I was just wondering, because I know under the disadvantaged community grants, I believe upstream, they got some funding for runda removal. So I know that's also going to be moving forward with, I believe, Stillwater Sciences.
Okay.
So it would be nice to see how non-native vegetation removal might be supportive in a greater effort with, because that was in the upper watershed. And then there's a runda removal happening downstream, but it would be nice to get some runda removal happening in our basins. And then of interest that we've been discussing for a long time is the construction of shallow monitoring wells. Yeah, I think it would be just good to have this on the agenda so we can discuss where we can bring partners in and be aware of what else is happening and how we can maybe from an economy of scale complement each other's work. I strongly feel like we should definitely take advantage and submit something, especially that there is no grant like matching requirement. It's like if we let this opportunity go by, it would be foolish. We'd be saving our pumpers and constituents a lot of money if we brought some grant funding in without, increasing their rates. So I would like to take advantage of this opportunity in September.
Okay, and Director Kimball.
Also, like under other projects, I think given the sensitivity, mainly from up in the valley, but the sensitivity to shallow domestic wells going dry, either in a drought or as a result of nearby pumping or whatever. And the fact that we do have in our plan levels that potentially will run some wells dry. I think we should think about a project to evaluate those wells, find out exactly which ones they are, how they're used, whether they're industrial or agricultural or domestic, and maybe look at looking for funds or applying for funds to either improve those wells or replace them, so that we ensure that that there aren't shallow domestic wells that go dry. So that we don't have that on our plan, but I wouldn't be surprised if the water board comes back and comments and wants more information, and I think that's something we should look at. So thank you.
Okay, thank you. Information only. Got some thumbs up there. And any other comments from or questions? Okay, so moving on, we have, let me pull up my agenda again. Now we're up to the consent calendar. Are there any questions on our consent calendar? If not, I'm looking for a motion to approve.
So moved.
Thank you. Director McFadden is a first, and a second, please.
Second.
Thank you. Second for Director Villaseñor, and a roll call.
Okay. Okay, Director Kimball,
Aye.
Chair Long,
Aye.
Vice Chair McFadden,
Aye.
Director Minigan,
Aye.
Director Pace,
Aye.
Director Villaseñor.
She said aye, but we can't hear her.
Oh, okay. Okay, perfect.
Okay, that motion is approved unanimously. I'm assigned a reader right now. Okay, next is for an agreement with the Bruker Family Trust for a perpetual easement for East Grove monitoring well.
Chair Long and board, you have before you a couple documents. Legal counsel has taken a look at those from both sides. We early on, you gave us some leeway in offering some money to offset the essentially expenses of the landowner, and the Brucker Family Trust has the property pretty much exactly where we wanted that multiple completion well that would be able to monitor shallow, medium, and deep levels out at the East Grove location. They've been very good to work with. And Eric Elliott, I believe, was here earlier. It looks like he's still here. He has done an excellent job on seeing that one through. So I think we have before you a complete document that you can approve. And if approved, we will reimburse the Bruckers for their expenses with a payment of $5,000 for that. My guess is they've spent way more than that already on multiple copies of things going back and forth, but they've been really easy to work with, and this would be a permanent easement for that well site as well as construction. And Eric is, I believe he's already released the bid documents, and he would love to have this easement in place to do his mandatory job walk when that comes up soon. Any questions or comments?
Thank you.
I
Any
guess-
questions, comments? Eric, is there anything else that we need to talk about, or is there any public comment on this item?
No, nothing for me. I think as Tony mentioned, we would like to have that in place for the June sidewalk. So
Okay, thank you. I figured you've held on for this long. You might as well get a couple words in. Okay,
May I add one more actually piece of good news regarding the other site, but it is related to the monitoring wells project, is we have a completed access agreement from the state of California Department of Fish and Wildlife for the 3 other shallow monitoring sites that are around the Century Cienega site. So Eric and team have worked hard on that. And so that one's done, ready to go. And it didn't cost us anything except a lot of time and communication.
okay. So thank you. That's a good update. And with that, it would be a motion for staff recommendation. Can I get a motion for that?
I'll make that motion.
Thank you, Director Minigan. And a
I'll
second.
Happy to second.
I'll second the motion and I'll comment, but Tony, I don't know how you did that, but that was really a pretty amazing deal.
Well, thank you. I'll take Director Kimball for that, and I appreciate the comments, Director McFadden. And with that, we'll make a motion or a roll call.
Roll call. Okay, Director Kimball,
Aye.
Chair Long,
Aye.
Vice Chair McFadden,
All right.
Director Minigan,
Aye.
Director Pace,
Aye.
Director Villaseñor. Okay,
She says
perfect.
aye.
Yes.
Okay, motion is approved. Thank you. Next up, we got a development of well permitting. Oh, we already did that one. Okay, next up is the 4C draft fiscal year 2022-23 budget and groundwater charges. Tony.
I have to start off apologizing to the board. I didn't make as much progress on finishing the checking of the budget document as I did, but I would like to take the opportunity to walk through some of the things that I think are perhaps changing. I did put those in the agenda staff report. So to give an update on the monitoring well, as mentioned earlier, Eric has been working with Tony Morgan's team and others. I think he's even hit up people in parking lots that were standing next to drill rigs. So he's been on the street looking at this. So Eric has updated his construction cost estimate for the 4 wells, for the 3 shallows and the one 800-foot deep out on the Brucker Family Trust property. And so our update on the whole project, including well completion reports, et cetera, is in the ballpark of 600,000. That's actually back to the ballpark that we had early on. And then a couple of years ago, when we updated the cost, it was a bit lower. And now we're back up thanks to war and inflation and drought. But he's included a bit of contingency in that number, and we've heard that drillers aren't holding their materials prices longer than a few days. But we took the advice of the board and wrapped up the bid documents and got them out. And we're hoping to secure drillers that we can have. We will likely be able to get them, hopefully get in line, and then they will tell us that they're going to give us the final materials prices in September before they start. So we're going to have to wait on the final price, but we should be able to report something back to you in the July timeframe. I believe your period closes at the end of June, correct, Eric?
Yes, correct.
So that's the big one that we have to finish. And so we can't start construction until after September 15th. the end of the bird nesting season, because we do know that it's highly possible that endangered birds may be somewhat close to the site. And we have to finish by December 31st to comply with the grant. Perhaps they would have mercy on us if we got an invoice in a few days late, but they've already given us a long extension and been very helpful. So we're going to do our best to get that job done on time. A few other things that I think this well permitting review process, we're putting together some a little bit better cost estimate on that, as Tony Morgan shared. That goes on the as needed contract that we already have, annual report and updates. That estimate is approximately $50,000 for both basins, as well as updating the databases next year. So that's in the $50,000 range. We don't know how far we would get on the Cienega Springs enhancement project that your board directed us to evaluate. We've spent a little bit of time and done some coordination and some field evaluation, but it certainly seems like that's something that, given this grant, that we would like to include in the plans, and we'll flesh that out a little bit more. I had a draft of $50,000 worth to put the planning and the concept together and some of the estimates, and it may change, and I'll provide an update on that. Subsidence evaluation, the kind of budget number would be somewhere in the plus or minus $25,000 range. As Tony Morgan shared, he's going to be preparing an actual detailed cost proposal on that, but I don't have that for you tonight. But I believe that because PWR is providing the data, this is something that it would behoove us to try to do. So we would have Daniel B. Stevens get that data from DWR, and then compile that into a technical memo. And then I have one thing that our auditor said last year is we, I think, got by a little bit because we sort of, when the auditor was asking about our policies and procedures and financial controls, we said, well, you know, the board approves pretty much everything, and we have, you know, bylaws that are guiding this. But one of their recommendations was that we would adopt a set of financial controls in policy format. And so I have a few examples that we'll try to do. That's a scope of work that's pretty boring, but I think will be helpful the next time we're audited. Director McFadden said he got a list of 107 questions and said, you know, swear on the stack of the Bibles that you've reviewed every transaction personally. And he said, if I'm honest, I can't answer that. So we'll try to tighten that up a little bit as we go forward. And then one other thing that I did not include in here is I think that we've talked about on several occasions is that, you know, as the agency gets a little bit more mature, and we've gotten past some of these big tasks that were our mandatory tasks, and of course the monitoring well is something we committed to the state to do, and it's going to provide good information. But we really need to budget a little bit of time and expense, and probably some of our legal counsel's time on pursuing some of the folks that haven't been paying. I know Daryl's not looking forward to that either. He's been patiently participating in this meeting, and he's had some staff turnover. I think Daryl hasn't even made 1 year yet with United, and our CFO's new, and he has a few people retiring and moving on and doing other stuff. So he said, please give me a couple months that I can get my first budget adopted and get some new people oriented. But I think that United needs to commit to helping this agency, because we do have a few folks that essentially haven't paid their extraction fees at all since we started, and we need to do a little little work on that. And it's just the kind of thing that we have to take some time and track people down and start with a nice conversation, and then maybe there are some that are going to take a little more persuading. So so those are the things that are outside of the normal. I think all the rest of the budget lines are going to be fairly routine. And so I will bring you, I had a worksheet and I did not want to share it with you because we haven't gone through and made sure to get the numbers tuned in well. We think that we should be able to stick with the $12 an acre foot. The extension of the grant to the end of December allows us at least one more cycle, actually 2 more cycles from when we were originally planning to do the monitoring wells, because we have to pay for those up front and then invoice the state, and then the reimbursements come 4 to 6 to 8 months later. So the state is awash in money right now, but they haven't been super fast at paying. I think the poor DWR grant staff is just, they're overwhelmed with stuff. So we're going to have to be able to cover the cash flow. And as far as I know today, Daryl and I will get together and look through this, and we'll bring that back to you. But we would like to try to adopt the budget and the rates that go with that at the June meeting. And then those would be effective at the beginning of July. If they don't change much, if we don't find some oddity here, then I don't think it's going to be a major pothole for the pumpers. So we'll try to give enough time. I did have for D, which is the next item, that would allow us to set a special meeting if we want to chew into some of this stuff more or discuss some of these items in more detail. Otherwise, I could just get you the draft budget and the rates, and we can take care of it at the June meeting. I know this group is really looking forward to lots of extra meetings.
Okay.
Any questions on any of those, or anything else that you're really wanting us to include in the work plan? And I take the comments that you had. We will get together also with Tony Morgan's team, and we will look at this list of projects again, and we'll do our best to flesh those out and put some schedules and scopes and some rough costs together. Again, even though these grants are 100%, it's a good deal, but you do have to have the cash up front to pay for whatever you do, and then you get reimbursed. So that's just something we always have to keep in mind on the timing.
Well, and Tony, I appreciate that consideration, because it is really those that pump water that are paying the fees, and we have made a pact as our board to ensure that we don't continue to raise the fees, and that we were hoping to reduce the fees. And so I think that's an important factor to not forget as we're looking at our budgets, because we had asked them that our plan has been done, just hold on till our plan gets done and then we can reduce our fees. And so I am hoping that that is the case for this, because I just think that that's important that we follow with what we said. Doesn't mean that we can't go out for grants and we can't do projects with the state and federal and funding and all that kind of stuff, and as needed. But I do want to make sure that we also follow with our commitment that we stated that we would do. Director Menigan.
So Tony, with the RWM program, DWR would sometimes take up to like 6 months to reimburse. Is that the same for our progress reporting and invoicing with Sigma program?
Yeah, Director Menigan, we've been invoicing on a quarterly basis, and we just, I think this last week, DWR completed review of invoices number 10 and 11. So that's going back 6 months. We just submitted 12. And so I'm assuming there will be payment very soon on those, but 2 invoices ago, that's going back a ways. So we were carrying that for a while. That'll help us to get reimbursed. But yes, I would say 6 months is early on. I think we were getting reimbursed within about 3 months when we first started several years ago, and now it's stretched out a bit. So I believe that the staff at DWR are doing what they can, but I don't think they really added very many people, and they're pushing a lot of grants through that agency. So yes, 6 months is probably a minimum these days.
Okay. Well, I think when we're looking at the projects on the schedules, like Chair Long said, let's just consider a 6-month reimbursement and see how that might affect project budget.
Right. I haven't been able to touch up our cash flow projection, and that was very helpful when we were working with DWR on our grant amendment to really look at a month by month and then try to estimate when is the groundwater revenue coming in, when are these payments going to have to be. And so that's one of the things I'd like to do for a couple of years as we put some of these in here. That really helps us so that we one of the things, well, I'll save that for another time. But yes, I will work with our consultant, and we'll look at these, and we'll sharpen our pencils and get these numbers back and take seriously what Chair Long said, is that yes, we did commit to the pumpers that we wouldn't just go up and up and up, but we would get this stuff done, and we would judiciously do projects and things, but we would be careful.
All right, Director McFadden.
Chair Long, I have to apologize, but I'm going to have to get to my gate. So
Impressive,
sorry.
thank you.
Sorry for the circumstances. If you decide on a date for a budget review, please let me know, and I'll do my best to do that.
Thank you very much, and safe travels. Enjoy.
Bye-bye.
Any other questions, comments, public comment? In hearing none, the motion requested is just to hear the presentation from staff and provide comments and directions. So I believe we've done that. So receive and file. Can I get a motion to receive and file?
So moved.
Thank you, Director Villasenor, and a second by Director Minigan. So roll call, please.
Okay, Director Kimball,
Aye.
Chair Long,
Aye.
Vice Chair McFadden, well, he's gone, so we can't take okay. Director Minigan,
Aye.
Director Pace,
Aye.
Director Villasenor.
Aye.
Perfect.
Okay, so that is unanimous, our 5 votes. And next we have is our special board meeting for budget adoption and setting groundwater charges. So the next rolls into the consideration of the date. So back to you, Tony.
So this would really be a choice. I believe that we probably, well, we can make the adoption of the budget at the regular June 16th board meeting. And so Eva will advertise that as the point at which we adopt the budget and the rates. And if we want to have a meeting prior to that to talk about some of these details, then that's, I think, what we really need.
Okay, so do you have any date to suggest that we have a pre-meeting or a first meeting for a second meeting? What do you got?
Well, if there are any changes, how about, what would June 2nd look like? For a quick meeting to chew on some of these budget items further. Would that work for
It would work for me. Anyone
can-
else
Yeah, I can do June 2nd.
at 5 o'clock?
okay?
Gordon has a thumbs up. All right, looks like June 2nd. Glenn's good with that.
Okay,
Christina's good too. So, wow, first one and done. June 2nd, 5 o'clock, we got a meeting. You guys are great. Okay, so then can I get a motion to approve that fiscal year 22-23 budget meeting for review will be on June 2nd at 5 o'clock?
I'll make that motion.
Thank you, Director Minigan. And a second, please.
Second,
Second, Director Pace. Roll call, please.
Okay, Director Kimball,
Aye.
Chair Long,
Aye.
Director Minigan,
Aye.
Director Pace,
aye.
Director Villasenor,
And she said aye, so we are unanimous. And if you could send that reminder out to all of our directors, so we can also let McFadden know, that would be good.
Yes.
Okay, so back to our agenda. That is the last of our agenda items. So I believe we heard from Director Minigan in regards to future topics. In the conversation was on grants. Am I correct on that? Okay, and of course, we'll be having budgets as our future item. Any other, do you want to present at least the letter that it gets sent to Assemblyman Bennett at that time or whoever else, just so that we have it for record and it's public? It could be under consent or whichever you guys call. Are there any other future topics that this board would like to discuss?
Chair Long, I just got a text from someone I work with on legislative matters that said that 2201 has been taken off of suspension. So it looks like it's active again. So maybe June 2nd is a good day to have that, get that letter to you.
Yes, somehow I have that feeling.
Yeah.
So with that, any other questions, comments? Okay, so we have it and we'll be adjourning the meeting now and it's at 6:50, 6:51. Thank you, everyone. And we will see you June 2nd. And we'll also see you Friday, June 3rd for a fun event of food and just seeing each other in person. That's going to be amazing. So thank you very much. I hope you all have a great night and we will see you later. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Good night.
Good night. Good night.
Okay.